right? So that's another important thing about the Blackboard session. So since you're asking me about that thing, do you know how to get an access to Blackboard session, everyone? No? Anyway, I'll try with this one, and I will show you how to get an access. So first, you go with the Google Chrome, because the Blackboard session is very much, this is friendly with the Google Chrome. So if you have Apple or any other browser, like Apple uses Safari, or if you want something else, whether it's the Internet Explorer or Mozilla, it will not work well with the Blackboard session. So Blackboard session is particularly designed and I think user-friendly with the Google. So here is how you need to do, right? So first, you go to the cloud decking, right? So here's the cloud decking login. You do that. Now in username, you put your name, not my name, you put your name, okay? Then you put your decking password, right? So here I am putting my decking password. Hopefully I am right. So now it will let you go through, but you will not face these things because this is only for the unit chair, but you will face the student, what they can see, but that doesn't matter that much. So once you are in the MPE 781 Economics for Managers page, right, you go to the resources. Can you see the resources there? You click there, and then you will find the cloud classroom here. Can you see that? So if you click the cloud classroom, that will give you this bit. Now you need to go through the Blackboard. So now, can you see this one? MP 781 Blackboard recording 2018 8/12. So basically it's the 12th of August 2018. Now for you, yes, make sure you listen that one, right? Because this is the one which actually discuss the cloud decking, discuss about your assignment. This is the very important one, right? So if you want to do that, you can click that and see what happens. Now you see, it will give you this kind of thing. You can also download it from your, that thing to your computer, right? Now if you click that, you find me that I'm talking here, right?
Hi
And
everyone,
so here I am.
welcome to our Blackboard session.
So
Today we
basically
have
the
code.
first one,
Now for
we are
that,
talking
your
about
analytics or your some
the problem set.
technological capacity.
Now don't be
skills.
confused with the first one.
Clearly there is a price difference between.
Hang on. Don't be confused with this one, because the first we solved the problem set, right? But you need to go through the last 1 hour. I'll see what is that.
Cost, it is better, more
Okay,
days
here
go
it
by
is.
after this deadline.
Now, can you see that? Your assignment question is up there, right? So basically what I says, after 1 hour, 19 minutes, right? Or after 1 hour, pretty much we discuss the assignment question. Can you see the assignment question there? So it's not only just assignment question we discuss. Look what I've done here so far. I'm talking about the word limit. I'm talking about the research.
Right? So you guys got an
and I've also shown you what possible diagram you can draw. It is also there. Can you see that? Okay. So then we're talking about the consumer surplus, producer surplus, deadweight loss, everything is there, right? And after that, where did I finish? Oh, there's a search cost. Basically, what is the rationale behind the online shopping? And again, there's a deadweight loss, online shopping. You can see that all the diagrams and everything is there, right? So then, this is the taxation. What would be the effect of the taxation, and so on. Finally,
in the long run, what will happen? The domestic retailers become, in the long run, I make that, right? These are the questions, what I'm saying. It is references, right? From question 1 to...
So look at this on the right side, what I'm writing. So I'm also telling you this topic probably related to week 1 topic or week 2 topic. This question is probably related to the week 3 topic. This question is probably related to week 4, week 5 topic, right? So I'm also telling you that. So that's why I'm saying it is better to go to the Blackboard session first. Now I'm showing you how to get an access, how to get the download, and how you do that. And it's auto recording as an echo recording as well. I think no one will miss that. Is that okay? Are you happy with this? Okay. And there's one more student. You're happy with this? Now you got it? So it is already there. Okay. Now what I'm saying, after that, if you have any problem, so first you go through that thing and then you have a problem, send me an email, come to my consultation hour, and we can discuss that thing. But before you go through that and you ask me the question which I already discussed, in economics it's called inefficient. You are doing the same thing again and again, right? And that doesn't make any sense, right? So this is one of the things that you need to put in mind. Another thing that I want to discuss is about the final exam. Now, I know you have to do a lot of questions, a lot of things. So I'm going to give you 2 options. And today is a time for voting. One of the options you have to choose. If you raise your hand, it means yes. If you don't raise your hand, it means no. Right? Okay. Option 1. Option 1, basically I'm telling you that if you go through the practice questions, your final exam will be very similar to practice questions. So as long as you are comfortable with the practice questions, you will be fine. That's the option 1. It's very general from topic 1 to topic 10 because week 11 is basically revision week, so it doesn't matter. Topic 1 to topic 10, all those will be covered in your final exam. That's your option 1. Option 2, now here's the part. I can give you 15 or 18 questions, but these are your final exam questions. So what does that mean? These are the questions I'm going to choose. Out of these 15 or 18 questions, I'm going to choose any 6, right? It could be 18 questions, right? And out of 18 questions, I can choose any 6. And when I say I'm going to choose from those questions, it basically means I'm going to do cut, copy, paste. Line by line, word by word, comma by comma. No change. Only problem is, on week 10, I'm going to release those questions. As soon as I release this question, you cannot ask me any question regarding those, because these are your final exam questions. You will take preparation, you can discuss with your friends, whatever you do is up to you. But you cannot ask those questions to any of the tutor, any of your lecturer, or any of them. Of course, I will also put an instruction to all of this lecture because they know these are your final exam questions, right? That I can do, right? That's your option 2. So the option 2, you definitely know what are the question comes, except there's some probability. If I give you 18 questions, each question will come 1/3 probability. If I give you 12 questions, then each question will come with a half probability. Right? Depend how many questions, but these are your final exam questions, so you don't need to be worried about anything because you know what you are getting. Right? Having said that, what will I do in the revision? Then revision, what I will do, in the whatever the exam that I choose, similar type of question, but not identical. Similar type of question I will discuss in the revision week, so that you know how you can solve these questions. Now, it's time for vote. Option 1 or option 2. If you go for option 1, don't raise your hand. If you go for option 2, raise your hand. Really? Everyone is okay with the option 2? Okay, so everyone voted for that. So we have decided. So we go for option 2. You can lower your hand now. So option 2 has won. So what does that mean? On week 10, I'm going to release the final exam question, and I will call it final exam question bank. So there will be either 12 questions or 18 questions. Whatever the question is, I will choose any 6. Right? We have decided on that. Do you feel comfortable with this? Okay. Anyone here who does not feel comfortable with the option 2? This is the time you can raise the question. Otherwise, we'll move forward. Okay? Okay. So that also means, what is the purpose of giving you the exam questions up front, right? One of the purposes is, I don't want you to learn everything, but I want you to focus on a couple of basic things and couple of tools that you need to learn no matter what, right? And if you are confident with those tools and those concepts, that will be good enough, right? That's my objective is. So we have decided for option 2, from now on, don't ask me any question about the final exam, right? Week 10, you'll get the exam question bank, okay? But here's the catch. Now that you decide, right? Always remember, the bad thing comes after the good thing. The catch is, these questions are straightforward, but some of the questions might be a bit tricky, right? Tricky in a sense, you need to think, you need to do research a little bit. What does that mean, right? But I think you have enough time to prepare. Week 10, week 11, then you have, on top of that, you have 2 weeks, right? And our exam will be on 17th or 18th of October, around that time, right? I just got the preliminary report, and it says that almost 17th or 18th. I forgot which date is that. Right? So that basically means which day we are going to finish the lecture. Is it 29th? Right? Still you have a 15 days. But remember, we finished 29, but your exam question paper comes back 2 weeks before. So what does that mean? You are almost getting 1 month time, pretty much, to prepare. Within that 1 month, if you don't solve those tricky questions, well, man, that basically means you're not working hard enough, right? Okay, let's go through these things. Last week, what we have done, but even though I said tricky question, remember in the revision week, I'm going through some of these questions, and I'm showing you how to solve. Except these questions are similar but not identical. So then you have to do your thing. Life is very easy, right? Don't make it complicated. So the game theory. So remember, the last week we finished the monopoly. We discussed about the natural monopoly as well, right? We talk about the common knowledge. Remember that door problem, heaven and hell door problem. And today I'm going to discuss about a little bit of the game theory. But in the game theory, I believe I discuss about the player's strategy and payoff. That part I discussed. I also discussed the definition 1, which is a common knowledge. Right? I also discussed that part. Now, today we actually start from the particular game. We call it Prisoner's Dilemma. Right? Once we finish the Prisoner's Dilemma, then the game theory part is over, and then we can go back to this topic. By the way, one more thing that you need to know, the Prisoner's Dilemma game I already solved in the last Blackboard session. Right? Because remember there's a disturbance in the lecture class, so we couldn't cover. 45 minutes is lost in the process. Now it is already discussed, right? The last Blackboard session you will find that. Next Sunday there will be no Blackboard session, and in fact if you go to the today's lecture slides, you'll find there will be no problem set, right? What happens next Sunday? There will be open day. And you find me here, so come to visit us. We'll be in HC building or something there, right? I'll be there from 11:30 to 12:30. So that's why we don't have that thing. But that's also good. You got enough time to prepare for your assignment as well. So what is the prisoner's dilemma? Now, I need a volunteer to discuss with. Who will be my volunteer? Anyone? No? You volunteer a lot, right? I need someone different. Okay, who will be my volunteer? Who will be my volunteer? When I say volunteer and everyone looking down, why? Okay, I'll choose you as my volunteer. What's your name? Della. Okay, Della will be my volunteer, right? So here's the problem. Della and Nobin, right? They're not very good person. What they're doing, they're planning to rob a bank, right? some bank in here, A bank. So Della and Nobin made a plan to rob a bank because they are a bit lazy and they want to be a millionaire within a second, right? So there's a blueprint how to rob the bank and everything. So what happened, while we are robbing the bank successfully, but at the end, bad thing happened. We both are caught red-handed by police, right? Once we are caught by police, they put us a van, taking back to the police station, right? So here's my conversation. I'm asking Della, okay, look at this, what is our option at the moment? We committed crime and we got red-handed. We caught red-handed, right? So here's the option. Look at the table carefully. So we are the two prisoners, basically, because we caught red-handed, so there's a potential, we are the potential prisoners. We can do two things. Either we can confess, right, or we can deny, right? So I'm telling Della, look, this confess and deny, and this is a payoff matrix, and this is a common knowledge. That means Della knows that, Nobin knows that, Della knows that, Nobin knows that, and so on, right? So what is this matrix tells us? Each of these cells actually tells us the strategy profile and its payoff. Suppose Della choose confess and Nobin also choose confess, then what will happen? Both of them get 1 year jail period, right? Of course, the police realized they were caught red-handed, right? So we committed the crime, there's no denying it, and we are confessing, yes, that is true. But if Della confess, but Nobin deny, I am assuming the first number belongs to Nobin's payoff, the second number belongs to Della's payoff, right? So basically, if Nobin denies, he will set free, but Della confess, so she will get 10 years jail. Can you see that? 0, 10. Similarly, if I confess and Della denies, then I will get 10 and she will be free, right? But if we both deny, then we'll get 8 year jail period. So I'm telling Della, look, while I'm in the van, this is the scenario, pretty much, right? So we have an option, confess or deny, and if we do that, these are the jail periods that we can have. And since our objective is to minimize the jail period, because once we have 1 year jail, we can come out and we can make a plan for another bank to rob, right? This time we'll be very careful not to be caught red-handed, right? So why not you choose confess, and I will choose confess as well, because that will ensure us the minimum jail period. Am I right? That makes sense. So in the police van, while they're taking us to the police station, I'm promising Della, you choose confess, and I promise I'm going to choose confess. That's what happened. While we're in the police station, Della was put in a different room. I was also put in the different room for interrogation, right? What are you going to choose? Confess or deny? She's going to choose deny, right? What thing should I choose? Hey, look, I'm not that bad person like her, right? So I'm going to choose confess, say for example, right? So if I do that, she chooses deny, I choose confess because I promised to her and I'm going to keep my promise, right? At the end, what will happen? I get the 10 years jail and she will set free, right? Suppose that thing happened. Now the question is, why she chooses deny? Even though I promise. I thought I promised. The thing is, sometimes in the game theory language, we call it cheap talk. Why is it cheap talk? Think carefully. If I want to cheat on her, what will I say? Exactly the same thing. You confess, I will confess. But in my mind, I'm thinking to cheat. Because if I cheat, I will get the maximum one. Maximum means I'm going to the minimum jail period. My utility level will be maximum then. Right? She's thinking exactly the same way. If Nobin is a good person, then whatever he says, if Nobin is a bad person, he will say exactly the same thing. So that argument itself or that commitment itself means nothing, right? So in this case, whatever she is doing is the right thing. She will choose deny. Why? Because deny is her best response. That's the first thing. Now I'm going to show you what does the best response means in game theory. The best response in game theory means, given the rival player's strategy, you will choose that strategy that will give you the highest payoff. In this case, remember my objective is to minimum jail period. So I will choose that strategy that will minimize my jail period. In that sense, deny is my best response, right? As long as you realize that the argument or promise does not make any sense, you always choose your best response, right? The idea that she says, we don't trust Nobin. I don't know what he's going to do, right? So now I'm going to show you how you solve the game. So before that, I just need to draw these things. Now, the game theory, have you heard a movie called A Beautiful Mind? John F. Nash. So basically what he does, he actually solved the game theory, and the idea of the game theory is, when you make a decision, it is not just your decision, it also depends what the other players are doing, right? In particularly, the other players' action also affect you. If this is the case, we call it strategic interaction. So game theory is used to analyze the strategic interaction, and the objective of this game is, given the rival player's best strategy, what strategy I shall choose so that I will get the maximum benefit and my rival player has no incentive to deviate. Basically, I make his life miserable as much as I can, right? So now I'm going to show you how you can do that. But before that, I need to draw this matrix first. Give me 1 minute time. So everyone is with me so far, okay? So confess, deny, then 1, 1, 10, 0, 0, 10, 8, 8, and this is Nobin, this is Della. So the first number belongs to Nobin, second number belongs to Della. Okay, now we go back to docam.com and show you exactly what is happening here. Can you see the game? Is it clear? Okay. Now remember, this is Nobin's strategy. So basically, what I'm saying, this is Nobin's strategy and this is Della's strategy, right? Whenever I say best response, if I put a star, that basically means this star is the best response for Nobin. That means given Della's strategy, a strategy is the best response for Nobin if it gives a minimum jail period in this particular scenario. And Della's best response is noted as a plus sign. Clear? Whenever I put a plus sign, it means it is Della's best response. Now see, the first number belongs to Nobin, the second number belongs to Della. Is that clear? So what does that mean? 1 is the first digit, it belongs to Nobin. This number, it belongs to Della, and so on. Now suppose Della chooses confess. She chooses to confess, right? What Nobin can do, Nobin can either choose confess or deny. Clear? Now, if Nobin chooses confess, he will get 1 year jail period. If he denies, then how many period he will get jail? He will set free. Clear? Your objective, what is your objective is minimum the jail period. Remember that. Of course, no one wants to maximize the jail period, right? So if you want a minimum jail period, clearly 0 is the minimum that you can get because you are set free. So I will say, since 0 is less than 1, therefore this will be best response for Nobin. So what does that mean? It basically means if Della chooses C, Nobin will choose D because D will ensure that he will get minimum jail period. Clear? In that sense, D is the best response for Nobin when Della chooses C. Is that clear? Okay. Now suppose, remember Della has another strategy. That's deny. And you have to find out if she chooses deny, what will be Nobin's best response as well. So suppose she chooses deny, then Nobin can choose either C or D. If she chooses C, not she, is a he. If he chooses C, then he will get 10. Or alternatively, he can choose D, then he will get 8. So clearly 8 is less than 10. That means 8 is much better than 10, right? So what does that mean? That actually implies if Della chooses D, Nobin will still choose D. Why? Because that will ensure him to have a minimum jail period. Now, if you look at carefully, this star and star, all those things belongs to D. So what does that mean? Now you actually find Nobin's superior strategy. In game theory language, we call it dominant strategy. It basically implies it doesn't matter what Della does. Nobin will always choose D because that will ensure him minimum jail period, irrespective of what Della does. Whether she will choose C or D, Nobin's best response is always choose D. If that's the case, then D is also known as a dominant strategy for Nobin. In other words, Nobin will never choose C. So in the previous example, when Della and Nobin is playing, Della is doing the right thing. Remember, she chooses D, but Nobin is not doing the right thing. Does it make sense? Okay. Similarly, now, once we do that, now Della has to find out what would be her best response, right? Della knows Nobin can choose C. If Nobin chooses C, then Della can either choose C or D. If she chooses C, she will get 1 year jail period. If she chooses D, she will get 0 year jail period. So obviously 0 is much better than 1 in this case because your objective is the minimum jail period, so this will be her best response. So plus sign is there, right? Similarly, Della knows that Nobin has another strategy which is D, right? If Nobin chooses D, Della can choose C. In that case, she will get 10 years jail period. If Della chooses D, she will get 8 years jail period. In this case, 8 year will minimize the jail period because 8 is less than 10. So her best response is again D, right? So that basically means D is a dominant strategy both for Nobin and Della. Is that correct? So what does that mean? It basically means irrespective of what Nobin does or what Della does, each of these players always choose dominant strategy, which is D. Clear? We just figured out what is the best response. Now here's the definition of the Nash equilibrium. John F. Nash tried to solve this game, how we get our equilibrium, and this equilibrium concept is named after his name, and we call it Nash equilibrium. Nash equilibrium has a two-part. One part, given other players' strategy, you find out your best response, which we already did, right? Given Nobin's strategy, Della's best response is to choose D. And given Della's strategy, Nobin's best response is to choose D as well. So in other words, D is a dominant strategy for each of the player who is participating. So that's the best response we figured out. Second part is the most important part that Nash says. He says, okay, once you find out the best response, find out the strategy profile that consists each player's best response. So what does that mean? If I choose strategy profile CC, is there any star or plus sign there? That basically means this strategy profile does not consider any of players' best response. So that will be out of the question. We don't consider that. If I choose CD, which is this cell, I can see it is the best response for Della because plus sign represents Della's best response, but there's no star, so it is not a best response for Nobin. That will be also out of the question, right? Then if you choose this cell, D and C, it is best response for Nobin, but not Della. So you can't consider that because Nash says consider a strategy profile that consists each player's best response. In that respect, DD is our ideal candidate. Why? Because look at this, plus and star sign. Plus and star signs are there. So what does that mean? DD is the strategy profile that consists each player's best response, right? Now, once you find out that strategy profile, which is DD, the second bit, what Nash says, now you have to ensure that no one has an incentive to deviate, right? Once you've considered the strategy profile that consists each player's best response, now the second bit you need to show that no one has an incentive to deviate from that strategy profile. In this particular scenario, the answer is no deviation. Why? Because we already proved D is a superior strategy for each player. If you want to deviate, then you have to choose other strategy, which is C. But we already said that C is the inferior strategy because it will not minimize your jail period, right? So now you can say DD, that strategy profile not only consists each player's best response, but at the same time, no one has an incentive to deviate from there. If that's the case, you can say DD is your Nash equilibrium. Is that clear? Okay. So now I will say DD is the Nash equilibrium, and in this particular scenario, each of them will get 8-year jail period. Is that clear? Now, I am in a big problem here. I'm quite confused, highly confused. Why? I thought the best response means you are minimizing your jail period, right? And the Nash equilibrium says the best response, or the Nash equilibrium here is the DD, which is your best response to minimize the jail period. And when I look at these things, you actually end up with the 8-8 jail period, but the best one is there, CC, which is 1-1. No one is getting that. So what does that mean? Now we are in dilemma. Dilemma in a sense, we thought we are taking our best, right? And we also thought that our rival player is taking his or her best. But by doing everyone's best, what happens? We end up with the worst outcome, right? What sense DD is the worst outcome? If you aggregate the jail period, what will be the total jail period then? 8 plus 8 is 16. The other cell got 10 plus 0 is a 10. 0 plus 10 is also 10. And the last one got 1 plus 1 is 2. So basically, CC actually gives you the minimum or the lowest jail period, right? That would be the best outcome, but no one is getting that. That's why this game is called prisoner's dilemma. Each of these prisoners is rational. Given the other player's best strategy, they choose their best strategy that ensured them a minimum jail period. At the same time, they find out the Nash equilibrium so that no one has an incentive to deviate. But by doing that, they actually end up with the worst outcome. They actually end up with the highest jail period in terms of aggregate, right? And the lowest one, or the better equilibrium, is out there, which is 1-1, and no one is getting that. That's why we call it dilemma. And this is the same reason this prisoner's game is called a prisoner's dilemma game. Does it make sense? Okay. Now, in the real world, there's a lot of examples of the real world. One of the particular example is when you consider the environmental problem. So what is the environmental problem here? Of course, we care about the environment, right? We need a good environment because that will protect us from a lot of other problems. For example, we want a better air quality, we want a better water quality and all those things, because that will leave us a better health and all those things, right? The problem is, when you think about economic growth, employment and all those things, a country is looking for their own best, right? What is the own best? If my economic growth is accelerated, a lot of people will get job, I'll get a budget surplus and all those things, so it is good for economy. Now, the question is, everyone is doing the same thing. When everyone is doing the same thing, they did not realize they end up with the worst outcome. What will happen? Economic growth is highest, but you are creating a lot of air pollution, water pollution, and all those things. So in the long term, whoever is living in that economy, all are affected and ended up with the bad outcome. So if you look at the developing country, which the economic growth is very high, especially China, right? China is not a developing, or it's still developing in terms of human development index. Their economic growth is really high. But you also realize there are some provinces where the air quality is really bad. Not only that, if you go to the developing country in India or Bangladesh, you also find that because their air pollution, the tuberculosis is epidemic over there. That will affect your labor productivity and all those things, right? So the thing is, we are doing our best, but by doing that, we actually end up with the worst outcome. So the natural or the environmental problem is one of them, right? So this is why the prisoner's dilemma is a very popular game, because it actually explains the negative externality problem, such as environmental problem. Does it make sense? Okay. Now, when I say the best outcome, always remember, the best outcome, how I determine the best outcome, you take a sum of payoff. So what is that? If I choose CC, the sum of the payoff is 1 plus 1, that will be 2-year jail period, right? If I choose CD, then sum of this will be 0 plus 10, or you can choose DC, exactly the same, which is 10, right? If you choose DD, then sum of the payoff will be 8 plus 8, that will be 16. So clearly, here my objective is the minimum jail period. In that sense, this one will be the best one. The second best will be this, and the worst outcome will be this. Is that clear? So we are choosing our best. As a result, we end up with the worst outcome. That's the first thing, and that's why it's called a prisoner's dilemma. Now the question, can we solve these things? Or under what condition we can get CC as an equilibrium? Right? So let's go back to our experiment again, Della and Nobin. So what Della choose? D. What Nobin choose? C. So Nobin got 10 years jail and Della got 0. Basically, she's set free, right? So she's very happy she's set free. Good. Now remember, one of the things is going to change. What is that? Suppose Della and Nobin plays this game forever. So they live for infinite period of time, and they have to play the same game again and again and again and again whenever they meet. Is that clear? Sometimes we call it infinitely repeated game. That basically means you have to play the game repeatedly, and it is infinitely, it means that no one knows when the game will end. Right? Now see what happens. After 10 years, I come out from the jail, and I suddenly realize she's not in the jail. Right? Then what gives me an indication of that? She cheated on me. So I'm looking for her, and Della knows if Nobin come out from the jail in Australia, it will be a big problem. So she fled away from Australia, and she is living in London. Sooner or later, I figured it out, and I met her in London. Right? What will be your reaction first? My reaction is, Della, I thought you're going to choose C. I chose C because I trusted you, and you chose D. I went to jail for 10 years, and here you enjoy your life because you got minimum jail period. Why you are cheating on me? Why?
Because I think you were cheating on me too.
No, I didn't. Look at my past deeds. I got 10 years jail.
There's no guarantee.
Huh?
There's no guarantee at the moment.
Come on, I came out from the jail right now. The thing is, look at this. We are playing the game, but the game is played repeatedly. When the game is played repeatedly, one thing is different. History is made. So I can always charge her, look at my past behavior. I did not cheat on you, but you did. I promise, I tried to keep my promise. That's why I got 10 years, but you did not keep your promise. Remember, once the history has made, everything will change. Because you can learn your opponent's behavior from the history. I don't know what she is going to do right now, but I do know what she did last period. right? Now suppose Della is telling me, okay, how do maybe I'm a bit nervous. When the police asked me a lot of questions, I was so nervous. I don't know what to say. I simply say, oh, Nobin actually gave me advice. At that moment, I thought it was a good advice, but I made a mistake, right? Then I say, okay, that's good. Now, why not we rob another bank? This time in London. Let's do it. She agrees, right? Again, while we were robbing the bank, we caught red-handed. This time, the British police caught us. Same thing happens, we're in the police van, the same game, and I told her, look, you have to choose C. I chose C in the last time, right? Make sure you choose C. You cheated on me last time, I know that. Don't do that again. Again, we come in the police station, we are in the two different cells, what will you do? You again choose deny. Now, the thing is, this time, I also choose deny. Why? Because history tells me Della is not reliable. Whatever she does, whatever she promises, she cheated me once, there's no chance that she will not do it again. Right? I'll choose D. What will happen at the end? We both get 8-8. Right? After 8 years, we come up from jail. Now, Della is telling me, hey, I thought you were going to choose C. Then I'm going to tell her back, I thought you're going to choose C. Because we both get 8-8, that means you choose D. And I know in the last time you cheated on me, there's no chance that I'm going to choose C. So I'm going to choose D as well. I'm going to punish you. In game theory, we call tit for tat. That means you cheated on me, and I'm going to punish you till you cooperate. So it's called a limited punishment, right? That's how we both get 8 years, 8-year jail. After 8 years, again we come, and I say, why not we rob another bank? Let's forget about the London, go back to New York, and we rob a bank, right? And we again rob the bank, and we caught red-handed again, right? And I also remind her that, look, this game will continue no matter what. So you have to cooperate at some point. Otherwise, you are going to lose so many periods from your life, and I'm going to lose as well if I don't cooperate. That it will be losing thing for everyone. So again, we caught red-handed. The same police car. I say choose C. I will choose C. Right? Again, we had two different cells. What do you do? She's choosing C, I'm going to choose C as well. Right? So what happens after that? We got 1-1 jail period. And once we do 1-1 jail period, till we continue the same game, we always choose C, C, C. So what is happening here? The thing is, if the same game is played among the players, the same players, repeatedly, and no one knows when the game will end, then player eventually learn from the history. They will learn from the history about your opponent's behavior. And once they learn from the history, they know from the history whether this player is trustworthy or this player is cheater. If they realize that, they can also punish them. And the punishment strategy is you always choose your dominant strategy. The idea is I'm going to cut my nose, but it will also affect you in a serious way, right? So basically, if that's the case, then the opponent will realize eventually there's no way to win, right? So eventually, the opponent player has an incentive to cooperate. Because if they cooperate, then they will get minimum jail period. Does it make sense? This is why it's called infinitely repeated game. And only if the game is played infinite time, repeatedly, then you'll find that the first best outcome can be restored. Why? Because the history is made, and the players are learning from the history, and they're going to punish the other players if the history reveals that the other players are cheating. The idea is very simple. I don't know what you're doing right now, but I do know what you did in the last time, in the last period, or so on. If I know from there, then you'll be in big trouble. Is that clear? Okay. Now, this is called a tit-for-tat strategy. The idea is I'm going to punish you till you cooperate, right? This is exactly what I did. She started cooperating. I'm also start cooperating. I'm not going to punish her. But in game theory, there's another punishment strategy. It's called a trigger strategy. The trigger strategy idea is you pull the trigger of the gun and the other person is dead. So basically, it's a harsh punishment. Once you cheated once, I'm going to punish you forever, right? That's another way to do it. Now, how do I put this real-world example here? Okay, everyone heard about the US President Bill Clinton? Then you definitely know that Lewinsky scandal and all those things. What did Hillary do in that case? Does she choose tit-for-tat strategy or the trigger strategy? What strategy she choose? So when Hillary finds out that Bill is cheating on her, did she choose tit-for-tat? That means I'm going to punish you till you cooperate, or I'm going to punish you forever. What did she choose? She did not choose that. If Hillary wants to punish Bill forever, then Hillary probably go for divorce. That's the harsh punishment. You cheated me once, I don't trust you, that's the end of the relationship. Right? She probably goes for tit-for-tat strategy. I'm going to punish you till you correct yourself and cooperate with me. Now, the tit-for-tat strategy also depends what is your objective. Now, probably Hillary is thinking in the near future, he might run for presidency or presidential election or whatever it is. He might go for president, might be a potential candidate for presidency in the US. If that's the case, then trigger punishment probably also cost her a lot, right? So she might go for tit-for-tat strategy. The moment she did that, everyone realized one day she's going to run for presidency. And this is exactly what happened, even though she did not win. But this is the real-world example how the game is played repeatedly. And when the history is made, what you do, right? Now, here's the last bit of advice. Now, if this is a prisoner's dilemma, the first thing is it is dilemma in a sense, as long as this is one period game, that means I and Della will play only once, then always we go for our dominant strategy and the Nash equilibrium prevail. Why? Because we played once. We are not going to play it twice or 3 times, right? Then my strategy is I will always follow my superior strategy no matter what the other players are doing. In that case, we always end up with the Nash equilibrium. But if we do that, then we actually find out that that's the worst outcome. Even though we choose our best, we ended up with the worst outcome. It's sometimes called smart for one, but dumb for all, right? This is what is happening. That's why it's called prisoner's dilemma. The second big question is, can we cooperate? The idea is, if the game is played repeatedly and no one knows when the game will end, and if we figured out there's a fast best outcome is there, that means it will minimum your jail period. In this case, it will be CC, which is 1-1. Then yes, there is an incentive for player to cooperate. Why? Because player did know what happens in the last period. So from the history, they will learn the behavior, and accordingly, they will punish the other players accordingly, right? So why do you think that when you apply for a loan, the bank asks a lot of questions? And one of the important questions is you have to disclose your credit history to the bank. Why? It's exactly the game theory what is telling us. The moment you disclose that information, bank does not know you. There's always a good probability you will flee away with that money, right? But bank wants to know your credit history, because from the credit history, it will learn whether you are trustworthy or you are a cheater. This is another example of the repeated game, how it plays, right? So I think I give you a real-world example, a couple of real-world examples, right? And also tell you the essence of the game. Now that you know the game theory, they also says that once you know the game theory, it also tells you what is the best possible way to cheat. right? So that your rival player cannot win. Remember that. So use that tool responsibly, right? I did use that game theory against my wife, and I terribly lost that game because I did not realize that she is also an economist and she knows game better than me, right? So don't use that thing. Anyway, any question about the game theory? Is done? No question? Then we can go through today's lecture. So let's go back to macroeconomic thing. So this is the one. Now, most of these cases, if you go through the macroeconomic policy, is basically, this is the macroeconomic issues. Mostly you'll find these are the definition, right? Look at this, Great Depression, Keynesian, GDP, real GDP, GDP deflator, GDP measurement, CPI, GDP, unemployment rate. Pretty much you know all of them. At least you know what the unemployment means, right? So, but still, we need to go through some of this. But before that, I will discuss some of the first part, the Great Depression and Keynesian argument, and then I will take a break, and then I will start the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So here's the thing. So far, we finished the macroeconomic topic, and what we learned, basically proposition 1 and proposition 2. These are the essence. What is the proposition 1? Proposition 1 basically tells you the competitive market is efficient. That's the proposition 1 that we developed in week 3, remember? Then proposition 2 that we developed in the same week, which says that if you deviate from the competitive market outcome, you always end up with inefficiency. Clear? And then the question is, what do we need to do? Well, we looked at if the government intervene in the market, whether it's a price ceiling, price flooring, taxation, it always creates a deadweight loss. So that basically means in the competitive market, if the government intervene, it will always create a deadweight loss. That means inefficiency in the economy. So idea of government intervention in that sense is no government intervention. The prescription is very clear. Once you have a competitive market, you don't need a government intervention. In other words, you want to keep your government intervention minimal. Otherwise, it will bring deadweight loss. You deviate from the competitive market outcome, you end up with inefficiency. This view is advocated by the classical economists. Who are the classical economists? David Ricardo, Adam Smith. They are the classical economists, and their view is as such, the market, especially the competitive market, is efficient, and once you have a competitive market, we don't need government intervention. That is their policy prescription. Is that clear? 1929, something happened, and after that, everything has changed. So what happened in 1929? Now, before that, the world experienced the First World War, right, which took place around 1913, around that time. And it took place in Europe, right? United States of America did not join that war directly, right? But what happens, they produce a lot of weapons and they supply there, right? As a result, what happens, the weapon industry in US, that growth of the weapon industry, it goes like exponential rate, sharp increase. Rest of the industry cannot keep pace with that. More importantly, all the scientists, mathematicians, all this, I think you already know those movies. Remember the Code Breaker and all those things, right? All those things are coming, and what happens is coming to the industry. Scientists are required so that they can come up with the code and they can break the code and help their what do you call this one? Their friends, right? And so on. This thing happens during the First World War. Once the First World War is over, what happens to the weapon industry? The demand for weapons is almost zero. And as a result, the weapon industry drops drastically. The problem is, when one of the industry goes in the higher pace and all of a sudden it drops, whoever works for the weapon industry, they become unemployed. That's the first problem. Once you become unemployed, then what you need to do, you are looking for a job. The problem with the weapon industry is the skill that you developed, you cannot transfer that skill to other industry. Say, for example, in the weapon industry, I learned how to make gun. But how does that help when I join in the garments industry or some other industry? That skill is meaningless, right? As a result, the unemployment rate goes up drastically. Once the unemployment rate goes up, now remember the demand for goods also goes down. Why? The majority of people are unemployed. They don't have any income, so they cannot buy food or other goods. So the demand drops. If the other industries' demand drops, then those industries also lie down their workers. Now you have a chain reaction, right? As a result, the whole economy goes down. So in 1929, the United States experienced the Great Depression. And what happens, in one Tuesday, I forgot, 28 or 13, I forgot, that number of banks collapsed. General Motors share goes down to $2. Share market collapse. Agricultural sector collapse. You name it, any sector, all are collapsed, right? Everyone is asking a question. We believe in the classical economy view. What is that? Market is efficient. In particular, the competitive market is efficient. And one of the prescription is, don't intervene the market. And we did follow. But look what happened. All market crashed. Right? So it did not correct itself. Because classical economists also believe that market will correct itself through demand and supply. So competitive market pricing system is such, if something goes wrong, it will automatically adjust, right? And restore the equilibrium again. But that never happened. The whole thing collapsed. Then everyone is asking a question, something is wrong, right? Maybe the classical economists made a mistake. We don't know what it is. At that time, there was a British economist, his name is John Maynard Keynes. He wrote a book, it's called General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, which is eventually published in 1936. But this is the guy who's telling us what the classical economists told us, those are not correct. What he's telling us, there is something else in the market which does not correct itself. Now remember, John Maynard Keynes, he made a lot of money in the share market. So he did know that how the speculation and expectation that plays a role. Remember I talked about the expectation, the roof is falling down and all kind of thing. So he knows those things. And he says that what are the role of those expectations? It will determine the confidence level, the investor's confidence, the consumer confidence, the confidence level in the market. This is not determined through the demand and supply, right? And once this confidence is gone, it doesn't matter what happens, the market will collapse, right? Then he says that basically means classical economists are wrong. We need a government because we need to restore the confidence level, right? And that's why we need a government intervention. After that, whatever you learn in the macroeconomics and whenever you think about the government intervention, these are all Keynesian's prescription, right? Does it make sense? Why the Keynes becomes famous after that? Because now Keynes is asking a question about the proposition 1 and 2. And he's telling us those propositions may not be right. Look at 1929, what happens? All market collapse. If market is that efficient and it corrects itself, that never happened in 1929. And part of the reasons is, in the market, it is not just buying and selling a goods, it is also the confidence that matters. And once this confidence is gone, it doesn't matter what you're doing after that, right? So I can give you a very good example. Suppose there's a 10 bottle of milk. I put that thing on the table, 10 bottle of milk, each of these is 1 liter, and I'm telling you these are free, you can take it. Except one problem. What is that? One of these bottle milk is poisoned. And the problem for me, I don't know which one. Are you going to take it? No? Yes? No? What are you going to do? Now, what does that mean? The moment I make this announcement, your confidence is gone. And you realize, oh, I don't know, even though some of these bottles are okay, I don't know which one is that. So basically, if I choose that bottle, there's a good chance I might end up with the wrong one, and I will die. Right? Now you can see how the confidence level works. This is exactly what the Keynes says. In the market, this confidence matters. And we need a government to restore that confidence level. Now, what is the role of the government? Government will tell you, okay, you can go with this milk, but I'm standing beside you. If something goes wrong, I'm going to intervene, make sure you are okay. Still, there is a yes and no question, but it's better than the last time, right? It is better than the last time, but still you are asking about the confidence. Now, this is one kind of government intervention, but now if I come here and I say the bottle one is the poison one, so don't take that. Right? Rest of the bottles, according to our test, is okay. But if it goes wrong, I'll be there. Don't worry. Now you know your confidence is much better now. And you will say, okay, let's go for it. Let's see what happens. Right? So how the United States overcome this Great Depression? President Roosevelt took a policy, it's called a New Deal policy. And the New Deal policy is nothing but the extreme form of government intervention. The idea is, if you want to invest in the share market, government give you assurance that your money will not be lost. I'm going to give you money. If you invest in the agricultural sector, I'm going to provide you a subsidy. Right? So basically, extreme form of government intervention. In other words, they try to boost up your confidence. It is just like a milk bottle. I'm telling you, this first bottle is poison. The other bottles are okay, but if it goes wrong, I'm there. Don't worry, I'm standing beside you, right? So I'm not only identify what the problem is, at the same time I've given you an insurance that if something goes wrong, I'll be there. Suddenly that will restore your confidence, and now you are eager to go for the bottle of milk. This is exactly what the Keynesian argument is. The confidence level does matter, and if it is lost, classical view will not, that means market will not restore that confidence level. And then the whole thing will collapse. Same thing happened every time the recession took place. Now, after 1929, there was a 10 or 12 recession took place, and the last one is the GFC 2008. Every time the recession took place, you always find the same argument. There's a lack in confidence, right? This is the same. Now, who prescribed that? John Maynard Keynes. But that also raised me one particular question. If every time this thing happened and you say the same cause, then two things will happen. Either this macroeconomic model is not complete, or you have no idea what's going on. Why? Remember, when the doctor have no medical clue, I'm talking about the medical doctor, what causes fever? They always say it's a viral. Now economists behaving exactly the same way. When they have no idea what causes this collapse, they always say lack in confidence. Really? 10 times happen and 10 times lack in confidence, and still, that means that what they're doing, they don't know what they're doing, right? But here's the last thing. This is the story behind it. Now you know why the Keynes is important. So one of the important things he actually talked about, you can see that I actually write in the red line, insufficient private spending. Basically, people are not invest money, right? Why is that? Because they have no confidence. And if that's the case, Keynes says, in the long run, we are all dead. If there's no confidence, are you going to take those bottle of milk? No. Probably I will be starving, but not go there. If you go there, probably you will die within an hour. But if you don't go there, at least you have 7 days to live or more. Who knows, right? So that's the thing. So that's why it is said. So basically, Keynes actually tells us what will happen in the short run. Because there's no confidence, there will be no investment. And in the long run, because in the short run there's no investment, long run, all are collapsed. So all are dead. right? So that's why he's telling us. Now, before I take a break, one most important thing. While I was in a graduate student, they give us an objective question to one of my students. They are the master's student. And the question is such: who wrote the book, General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money? 4 choices: Adam Smith, David Ricardo, John Maynard Keynes, and Britney Spears. Guess what? Surprisingly, we find there's 4 students who actually answered Britney Spears. So don't make that mistake. Always remember, General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money is written by John Maynard Keynes, a British economist. Clear? Take a quick break, and then we'll start after that. Right? So let's start. We talk about the Great Depression. Now I'm going to talk about the GDP, nominal GDP, and so on. Shh. Shh. Okay. Economic growth. Now, one of the important things is when you talk about the macroeconomics, how your economy grows, that's one of the vital indication whether your economy is performing well or not, right? So when we focus on economic growth, the variable that we use to calculate the economic growth is the GDP. Now, what is GDP here? It basically means value of the final goods and services a country can produce. So every year we calculate the GDP, and we want to project what is the GDP growth rate. That will actually tell you whether your economy grows or in a stagnant situation or is diving down, right? So far, there are so many measures, but one of the very popular measure is to calculate GDP. And when we talk about the economic growth, we mainly focus on GDP growth. So what is GDP? It is the value of the final goods and services. So when you talk about the value, a lot of things will come up. Now I'm going to show you a very simple example, and you need to tell me what is the problem with that example. So let's go back to the .com. So this is page 1. So let's go with the .com here. So whenever someone says GDP, can you see that? GDP, it is an abbreviated word. It means gross domestic product, right? And definition, it means value of the final goods and services. So how do we calculate the value? First, you need to find out the quantity and price of the quantity, right? That is P, and the quantity of the goods is Q. So if you take the product of P and Q, that will actually tell you the value of the product, right? Idea is, if I sell 2 units of goods and price per unit is $10, what will be the value of those 2 units? That will be 20, right? And that will be the value of the goods, right? In fact, that is also a part of your GDP, and in fact, that's the GDP as well. Now I'm going to show you what is the problem with this one. Suppose I have year 2016, right? In year 2016, the price was $10, and the quantity that I sell is 2 units, right? So now I'm calculating year 2016 GDP. So GDP says the value of the final goods. That basically means price times quantity. So how much quantity? Suppose this country produces only 2 units of goods. For simplicity, I assume that, right? So now what does that mean? The total value of the goods will be 10 times 2, and that will be 20. Clear? Now think about year 2017. The quantity that I'm producing is still the same, 2. But the price, instead of 10, it becomes 20, right? Per unit of price. Excuse me. Now suppose, what will be the year 2017's GDP? Well, price times Q, that basically means 20 times 2, that will be 40. Clear? Now, I'm going to compare this and this. What do we learn from this example? First, year 2016 GDP and year 2017 GDP, are they same? The answer is no, right? So I will say GDP in 2016 is 20. Clearly, this is less than GDP in 2017, which is 40. Do you agree with that? Now the second question, what causes that? My GDP grows because of what? Because my quantity grows or because my price grows? So if you look at the quantity here and here is exactly the same. There's no change in the quantity. What is happening, it is the price that goes up. In fact, price becomes double in here. And because the price goes up, this is also reflected in your GDP, and that's why your GDP also becomes double. Clear? So this GDP goes up simply because your price changes, not because your quantity changes. Does it make sense? Right? When this thing happens, we call it nominal GDP. So what does that mean? Nominal GDP does not adjust the price level, right? And if you calculate the growth on the basis of nominal GDP like here, it will be misled. Why is it misled? Now come back in a different situation. Suppose one of this year I will choose as a base year. Which year you want to choose as a base year? 2016 or 2017? Your choice. 16? Okay. So if I choose 2016's base year, so let's do this. So year 2016, year 2017, I will say base year here 2016. So what does that mean? The price of the base year will be 10, right? Now in year 2016, price of the base year times the quantity, how much I produce? So basically 10 times 2, that will be 20. In year 2017, price of the base year, look at this, my price of the base year remains the same. Then how much I produce? Q. So again, 10 times 2, that will be 20. Now, if you compare these two, is there any change in real GDP? The answer is no, right? So what is the difference between this example and this example and what we learn? The thing is, the value of the final goods and services, this is the definition of the GDP. The problem is, when you consider the value, you need to be very careful whether the price is inflated or not. And it can go other way. Price can be deflated as well, right? And simply because your quantity does not change and because your price changes, that can also change your GDP. And we call this GDP is a nominal GDP. Clear? Now, when you talk about the economic growth, do not consider nominal GDP. Why? Because your nominal GDP, clearly from here, your output level doesn't change. It's simply because your price changes. That's why you're having a higher GDP. But the reality, when you adjusted the price, how I adjust it? When I choose the base year. Now look at this. In the second example, quantity will be multiplied by base year every time. As soon as you choose the base year, what does that mean? Your price remains constant. And when your price adjusted, that means you keep it constant and then you choose the quantity of year 1 or year 2, whatever it is, the result tells us you have the same GDP. That means there's no growth there, zero growth. Clear? So when you adjusted the price, we call it real GDP. So basically, in this case scenario that you are calculating, it is called a real GDP calculating because you adjusted your price level by choosing the base year. But here, that you are doing is nominal GDP. In other words, your price level is not adjusted. Clear? So whenever someone wants to look at or calculate the growth, they always consider the real GDP. Because you don't want to have an inflated or deflated price, and then you end up with the nominal GDP, and which will be very misleading. So the first thing you need to do, you adjust the price. Price remain constant. One way to do it, choose a base year. Once you choose the base year, price will remain constant. Now you look at the output level, right? That will actually tell you whether your real GDP grows or not. Does it make sense? So this is the definition. I think this example actually tells you what is the difference between real GDP and nominal GDP. It's a very simple example, but it actually tells you exactly what is happening. Then the last question, how do I choose the base year? Because it looks like that you are adjusting the price by choosing the base year. Now, which year you will choose the base year, right? Now, to do that, you have to do a lot of research. And generally, the central bank or the treasury, they do that research because you want to choose the year as a base year where there will be no underproduction or overproduction. So underproduction means suppose you are in recession. And if you choose the base year as a recession price, then basically every time it will tell you inflated, that is inflation. You don't want that. On the other hand, if you choose the base year price when the economy is booming, then after that, whatever you choose, if you choose that base year price, then every time you choose real GDP, it will always tell you your real GDP goes down because the price is deflated, right? So the treasury or the central bank, they will actually do the research on that, and then they will choose the base year, and generally every 5 or 10 years they change the base year as well. One of the reasons is, what happens, sometimes the new goods arrive, right? For example, 10 years back, is there any iPad? So if you choose base year price 10 years back, that would be misleading because there's no smartphone, no iPad, you don't have a price for that, right? So this is another reason we need to change a base year price every 5 or 10 years because the new goods arrive and we need to consider that part to reflect the quality and all those things. At the same time, you need to be careful. You don't want a booming phase as a base year price or the recession phase as a base year price, right? If you do that, then your real GDP will be misleading again. So that's the part that you understand here. Now we go back to the lecture slides. So here we talk about the nominal GDP, real GDP. I think you already know. Then what is the GDP reflector? It is the ratio between nominal GDP and real GDP. What it means, how much inflation you have. So in our example, remember, one is 40, one is 20. So if you divide 40 divided by 20 times 100, what will you get? 40 divided by 20, tell me what would be that one? Sorry? 2. Multiply by 100, 200. That means the economy has a 200% inflation. And we know that because your price is 10 and it becomes 20. Does it make sense? So this is how we also sometimes calculate the inflation. That means the GDP deflator. What you need to do, once you have a nominal GDP, then you calculate the real GDP with your base year, take the ratio, multiply by 100, that will talk about the inflation rate. How much inflation the economy is having or experiencing. Does it make sense? Do you want me to go back and show you how much inflation we have? Why not? Just do the quick exercise in case, right? So if I want to calculate the GDP deflator here, I'll just write down in a short GDP deflator. So then it is basically nominal GDP over the real GDP. So GDP deflator in 2017, right? So nominal GDP in 2017 was 40. Real GDP in 2017 was 20 times 100. That immediately tells you 200% inflation. Clear? So basically your price level goes up by 200%. And your real GDP does not change, but your nominal GDP changes because of that inflation. And that's a bad indication. What it means, when the price level goes up, your purchasing power drops. So this basically means you are worse off. On the other hand, your quantity does not change. So what it means, we are in recession to some extent. because it will eventually bring recession. Your purchasing power drops, you demand less. If you demand less, then what will happen? All those industries, they have to lie down their workers. Then your unemployment rate increases. Again, it will drop the demand further. Eventually, economy will enter recession. So you'll find that every time there's inflation, right after that, the recession is coming. That's why we need a central bank to control the inflation. Does it make sense? The best example is before GFC took place in 2008, 2006 or 2007, we know there's a well price hiking, that petrol price goes up, which eventually brings cost push inflation. And right after that inflation, what happens? Recession, GFC 2008. That's why we need a central bank to correct the inflation, right? Otherwise, it will bring something bad in the future. Clear? Okay. Now that we know what is the GDP deflator, so I think I actually give you an example, so I don't want to calculate this nominal and real GDP. I already give you a simple example. As long as you remember this example, the intuition is the same. Now, this graph basically tells you your real GDP grows up that much, which is the red portion of it, and the green portion, because of the price change, basically that's the nominal GDP, part of the nominal GDP, right? So you always focus on real GDP, that is the red portion, not the green one. Then, how do we calculate GDP? First, we know the definition of GDP, then we know what is nominal GDP and real GDP. We also know how we calculate the inflation. One way to calculate, remember, there's a lot of measures to calculate inflation. One way to calculate is to GDP deflator, because GDP deflator actually tells you how much inflation you have to some extent. Now the question is how we measure GDP. One of the popular measure of GDP is called expenditure approach. Now, here's the problem. When we say the value of final goods and services, how do I measure the value of final goods and services? Okay. First of all, GDP is considered as an income, country's income, the real GDP. But there's a various approach. One is called a value-added approach, one is called an income approach. If you go through that thing, it becomes more and more complicated, right? Then economists come up with the indirect approach. The idea is we are looking for an equilibrium. So what is the equilibrium? The equilibrium, in a sense, when your income is equal to your expenditure, and that would be equilibrium. Why? Suppose your income is greater than expenditure. That basically means you are making savings. When you are making savings, it is a part of leakage. How you make save? Oh, one way to put it, you put your money in the bank. The moment you put your money into bank, you expose yourself to the outside world. Because you never know, this bank can collapse. And if it does, your money is gone. Right? Another way to do it, your income is $100, but you are spending money $120. What are you doing then? You are borrowing money. And when you borrow money, again, you are exposing yourself in a sense that there will be interest rate that will be charged against you. And if something happens in the economy, I can tell you that interest rate will change and it will bite you at the end. So this says that then if you consider these two extreme outcomes, then only outcome that can be justified as an equilibrium when your income is exactly equal to your expenditure. Does it make sense? Because in that case, you are not borrowing, you are not saving as well. Now, why is an equilibrium? It is an equilibrium in a sense, no matter what happens in the economy, it will not affect you. Right? When the GFC took place in 2008, we know that all the countries are affected. But if you go to the remote area of India or Bangladesh, right, ask those marginal farmers, right, who are actually living hand to hand. Basically, whatever their income is, they're spending exactly the same much money because they can't borrow and they don't have any savings. And ask them, there's a credit crunch and all those things, the first thing they will say, what are you talking about? My situation does not change. right? At least in the initial, they will tell about these things. So why is that? Because my income is $100 and I'm spending exactly $100. So whatever happens in the bank, that will not affect me, right? So to some extent, that can be an equilibrium. Of course, this statement itself is wrong, but this class, I don't think I'm going to explain that why it is wrong, but you can understand the intuition, why is an equilibrium. So we established the fact, at equilibrium, your income must be equal to expenditure. To calculate the income in the real world is very complicated. So one way to do it, easiest way, is to calculate the expenditure. The idea is how much money you spend, right? Especially if you go to the supermarket, remember, and if you go to the developing country as well, they will always say, make sure you have a receipt. Why the government asks you to have a receipt? The moment you have a receipt, the record will go to government, right? Then the government knows how much money a country spends. That will be the country's total expenditure. Now, if I know the total expenditure, and if I assume my expenditure will be equal to my income at equilibrium, that expenditure itself is my income, which is my GDP, which is country's income, right? So this is the idea why they use the expenditure method. So basically they find, okay, how many types of agent a country can have? They says, okay, one type of agents is the household, another type of agents are the farms, another type of agent is the government, and then we have an external sector. Mainly we have these four sectors. Then what they say is, okay, household, how much money they spend? They actually look at their consumption expenditure, which is known as a C. Then they ask farm how much money they spend. Basically, you have to look at the investment expenditure, how much money farm invest. Then they ask, okay, the government, well, if you go to the tax revenue, that will be very difficult. But I want to see how much government spends money in the economy, which is the government expenditure. And in the external sector, how much export you do, expenditure for export, basically your export revenue, and how much import you make is your import expenditure. If you take the difference between these two, you actually end up with the net export. Now put all those four variables together, you actually get the country's GDP. Clear? This is the whole idea why they use the expenditure method. Because of its simplicity, this method is very popular. The other method, income approach, as I say, you can do also in that way, or the value-added approach, these are very, very complicated process. So we put it there, but we follow the expenditure approach. Clear? Now, generally, I don't say to memorize any of the equations because mainly these equations are derivative and you need to derive it. But if you ask me to memorize one equation that will make your life much easier, then I will probably say memorize that equation. Y is equal to C plus I plus G plus NX. It's a very simple equation, but every time you address macroeconomic problem, that equation gives you a clear idea what you are doing or what you need to do. Is that clear? So this is how GDP is measured. Now here is an example how you do it. Look at this consumption expenditure, then we take the government expenditure. Investment expenditure is basically the farm make is I. Then you have a net exports of good, and of course there is a statistical discrepancy. Basically there is some expenditure which is unaccounted for. So basically in that case we say the statistical discrepancy is always there. But if you put it there, you eventually find the total GDP. So always remember, country's GDP is C plus I plus G plus NX, and when we calculate the GDP, also remember we are talking about the real GDP, which means the price is already adjusted. Clear? Now is the business cycle. What is all about the business cycle? This is called a business cycle. So one of the characteristics of the business cycle is it's just like our life, ups and downs. We have a lot of ups and downs in our life because our expectation is something and we get something else, right? So look at this, what happens. Initially, we are going down and we reach the bottom of it and we call it turf. Once you reach top, the economy start going up, and that's the expansion phase, and eventually we reach the top point, which we call peak, and then again it goes to top, peak, contraction, and all this thing happen. This is a business cycle, right? So basically, we understand our economy is just like our life. It has got lots of ups and downs. Now the question is, what causes this? Right? Can anyone tell me? Spending habits will do that? This is his answer. Do you believe in that? Sorry? Government intervention. Okay, what else? Huh? Demand and supply. What else? Okay. You really behave like an economist. Probably all those variables are related. But I'm going to show you a very simple example. And my thing is, if that example produced the business cycle, then all of your explanation and variables all are meaningless and hopeless. Right? So let's see how it does. I will do a very simple experiment here and see whether it can do any better. So here it is. So here, I'll say time, and here, suppose I'm going to measure GDP growth. Very simple thing. Can you see this coin? Okay. It has got head, Queen Elizabeth II, and the other side, I don't know what it is, but I will say it's a tail, right? And the thing is, if the head comes, I will go up. And if the other thing comes, which is not head, I will call tail, will go down. Right? Let's start with this period. Say this is period T or period 1. Let's see what happens. So let's toss the coin. What I get? Head. So I'm going up. So here from here, well, I'm going to start, and this is up, right? So this is 0, so this is up, right? Toss the coin again. I need to make sure I'm not doing anything silly here. What I got? Head. Excellent. I'm doing fine here. We go up, right? Let me do it again. What do we get? Tail. Okay, so we are going down. Right? Doing it again. Again? Tail. Okay, so we are going down. Let's see how far we can go. What do you get? Head. We are going up. Now, that will be enough. If I connect these points, what will get? It looks like a cycle, right? So this is the peak point, this is the trough, this is the contractionary phase, this is the expansionary phase, and this is the expansionary phase. What we learned from here? I thought you were talking about demand, you're talking about supply, you're talking about all kind of variable, and I'm showing you, forget about everything, I simply toss the head and tail, I don't know about economics, but that gives me exactly what I need, which is a business cycle. Why I'm doing that, and why you're giving me those strange explanation, and how does this two fit? Here's the example. Long time, macroeconomists trying to predict the business cycle. What causes this business cycle? And you are not wrong. Whatever you are doing, the demand supply, private spending, government intervention, they're using a lot of models to predict that business cycle. So they are with you. Then there's an economist who says, hey, forget about this. You just toss a coin like Nobin, and still you get the business cycle. Now, the message, even though you laugh, but that brings a bigger problem in economics. When you are saying that thing, basically you thought it is a deterministic. Because every time you choose the variable, if you say okay, private spending causes that. That basically means it is a deterministic. If you go for lower private spending, probably you go down. Higher private spending, you might go up. If you say demand and supply, of course, if the market collapses, it will go down. And if the demand booming, then it might go up, right? So in other words, you're trying to do some deterministic thing. But here, what I did, completely random. And that randomness itself generates the business cycle. If this is the case, now we have a bigger problem. One of the biggest problems in the business cycle is when we are trying to identify or theorizing how we can predict this model or what can produce the business cycle, the other side of this story is there is a group of economists who are also saying these are random. Right? If something is random, then the question is what you're doing all are meaningless and hopeless. In fact, these are rubbish. Right? Here's the good news. The good news is business cycle is still we are trying to figure it out what causes this. And if you come up with a theory which can predict the business cycle, there's very good news for you. The Nobel Prize is waiting for you in economics. So go for it, right? But the problem is, the first you need to find out that the randomness is not there. If randomness is there, it will be biggest problem, right? This is exactly the same problem that the physicist has faced. While they're talking about the theory of relativity, the bigger picture, and they say this is deterministic, the quantum mechanism gives you bad news, it is a random. And now they cannot find out the unified grand theory, because how do you tackle this deterministic with the randomness? The same problem exists in economics. Does it make sense? Okay. Good news is Nobel Prize. Do some research on that. Right? And this is the good time to do research. All the good thing in this world is done by those who are between 21 years and 28 years. If you think about the Einstein, he came up with the theory when he was 21 or 22 years old. That's theory of relativity. If you think about the Isaac Newton, he came up with the calculus exactly in that age bracket, right? So you are young enough to do a research, and I'm pretty sure if you do it correctly, you might come up with the theory which can predict the business cycle, and you will win the Nobel Prize. For me, it's too late. I already crossed that barricade. So what does that mean? Whatever I do is just like a dry coconut. You can shake as much as you can, it will not come up with anything. Right? So my time is gone. So I leave that thing to you. Okay. Inflation. So what is inflation? Inflation is a process of rising price. By now, you already know what the inflation is, right? Remember when I talk about the GDP deflator, how the price goes up, that's the inflation. So inflation is the process of rising prices. Always remember that. And is a measure in the percentage change. So basically, this is the inflation measure. So price at period T, that is present price, minus the price of the last period, divided by, you take the difference, that means how much increased the price in the present period compared to the last year, divided by the last year price and multiply by 100, that will give the inflation, right? Now, how do I measure inflation? One way to do it is GDP deflator, but another one is called consumer price index. And the idea of the consumer price index is you take the basket of the goods and you choose these goods in the basket very carefully, right? Generally, we choose those goods which are very necessary goods, right? And then we compare this basket of goods, how much it cost me in last year and how much it cost me this year. Then you actually got the two different price levels. And if you look at the growth, that difference, that is that formula, the inflation rate, eventually tells you what is the inflation. So that's the consumer price index, right? Now, the one more important thing that I need to discuss in this inflation, do you think inflation is a problem? Or more importantly, I'm going to tell you exactly the way. If you can predict the inflation, is it a problem? Suppose I can predict the inflation. Does it a problem? Or if I cannot predict the inflation, that's a problem? Cannot predict. I thought so. You were going to say me that. Now I'm going to run an experiment. Suppose In fact, you're right. Suppose I can predict inflation. What happened? I realized after 2 weeks, the price level goes up by 30%. That's my calculation, right? Or say 200%. What will I do? The first thing you'll do, I will start hoarding behavior. So basically, I'll try to buy goods as much as I can, I put in the storeroom, right? Suppose my neighbor, Della, you volunteer for this, right, in this class. She's my neighbor, and she knows Navin is very good and all those things. We rob bank, and at the end, we cooperate, and all those things happen, right? So she realized, why Navin is doing that? All of a sudden, a big lorry came in front of Navin's house, and Navin is reload this grocery shopping and everything in the storeroom. Why is doing that? She started thinking. Eventually, she realized that Navin might think that the inflation is coming. What will she do? What are you going to do? So she's going to follow me, right? Now, you are the neighbors of Della. What will you do? Okay, if you do that, then you don't need to wait for 3 weeks. The inflation is going to take place right now, right? So when you predict the inflation, it becomes a problem, big problem. Because then you form an expectation, and that expectation plays a self-fulfilling role. So you don't need to wait for 3 weeks, inflation will take place right now. You see the problem? Okay, so it's better not to predict the inflation. This is the reason why we need a government. So the idea of the monetary policy is to check the inflation, and more importantly, what they do, before the iron gets hot, make it hotter. So basically, they know that inflation is coming, so they started doing all kind of contraction policy. That means increase tax, increase the interest rate, and all kind of thing. So they make sure that demand, there will be no overshooting of demand, so the price will remain the same. Yeah? But when you do this, remember what I said, the business cycle is random. So any prediction you do is also a random, right? That also means you made a mistake. There's a good chance. Making a mistake is a good chance. And when RBA or central bank made a mistake, everyone has to pay. And there's a history. During the Great Depression, there is one economist who says that, well, we know that weapon industry drops and all this thing happen. But there's another thing that actually triggers that thing, because the Federal Reserve Bank made a mistake. They thought the economy is booming, but they did not realize the economy is already in recession. So when you realize the economy is booming, you choose expansionary policy or contraction policy. Which policy you choose? Economy is booming means the inflation is coming. So you need to check the inflation, so you choose contractionary policy. But remember, economy is already in recession. They predict that it was booming, but it is already, in real world, it is in recession. Choosing a contractionary policy, what happens is supposed to go down in this way, but now it goes down sharply. Right? And that economist says because of that, Great Depression took place. Simply because Federal Reserve Bank made a mistake. The person who did that, later on he got the Nobel Prize. He's a very famous name. His name is Milton Friedman. Right? If you do macroeconomics, make sure you know his name. Milton Friedman, John Maynard Keynes, these are two famous names. Right? So all I'm saying, whenever that randomness, the head and tail is there, there's always a good chance you made a mistake. Right? Okay. Now, this is the inflation. You can see that it's also coming like a business cycle. That head and tail is a very good example. I'm asking a basic foundation of all the theories. Right? Now, there is a limitation of GDP. There's also a limitation of CPI. The limitation of the GDP is the definition of the GDP means the value of the final goods. How the value is determined? It is through the market, right? If there is no market for the goods, can you determine the value? That's the problem. Any goods that does not, their price does not determine in the market, you fail to acknowledge that good as a part of GDP. One of these things, which is a very precious thing, This is why we are here, is mother takes care of her baby. Is there any price for that in the market? But the thing is, that is very important part of the GDP, right? Because you never know, this baby can be another Albert Einstein. You never know that, right? And we are grow up here, we are doing degree. Why? Because our moms take care of us. Unfortunately, there's no price for that. This is the household type of work. There's no price for that, and therefore GDP fails to incorporate that. So you can see that household production is there. Clear? Environmental quality. This is another thing. As we know, externality problem, whether it's a positive or negative, there's no market for it. Again, GDP fails to incorporate that. Underground economy, corruption. When you bribe someone, do you take a receipt for that? If you ask for a receipt, what will happen? Oh, your life will be a big, big problem, right? Especially if you go to the developing country. So, what does that mean? There's no receipt, or there will be under receipt. Whatever happened, it is not part of the GDP anymore. It's a leakage, right? So that's the underground economy. Health and life. Life expectancy does matter. But there's no market for life expectancy, right? That's also a problem. Leisure time. That is also, is there any market for the leisure time? The thing is, nowadays, we know it is a problem, so we have a paid leave, we have a maternity leave, but still, do you think that will be enough? Right? There's a lot of argument against that, right? Some countries gives a 6 months maternity leave, some countries gives a 1 year maternity leave, right? So there's a lot of argument, and part of the reason is because there's no market for that, no market. So whatever we are doing, it is just superficially we are imposing. But the real price, we never know, right? And that could cause a problem. Economic equality and social justice. There's a well-producing country in Middle East, is called Kuwait, right? Kuwait's GDP and Australian GDP is pretty much the same. But the problem in the Kuwait is, if you look at their income distribution, majority asset owned by those sheikhs family, right? And majority people, they're deprived of the asset. But in Australia, because of we have a high taxation system, so there is a transfer payment, right? Our distribution is not like that, right? At some point, this equal distribution does matter. Clear? Because, look at this, if you go to the developing country scenario, you will find this picture. In the developing country, you will find that the social cost is very high. Social cost from what? Crime, violence, robbery. Why this thing happens? Because the people are poor. When I am poor and I'm deprived of food, morality is out of question. I don't care. My survival is at stake. Who cares about morality at this stage, right? Now, when I do that, I'm going to break the law. And if I break the law, it has a high cost, right? So the social cost will be very high. And this is one of the reasons why we need economic equality and social justice. Does it make sense? So this is the limitation of GDP. CPI has also limitation, because when you talk about the basket of the goods, remember we said the necessity of the goods? Same problem. 10 years before, there was no iPad, no iPhone. So how do you take that price level to calculate, right? So this is one of the problems, the quality. If I choose a computer in 1993, what is that computer will be? 486DX or something like that, right? Look what computer we are using now. Intel, dual, quadruple, and all kind of thing, right? Do you think the quality is the same? So if you choose a computer on that here as a price to compare, it will be highly misleading, right? So this is called a quality bias. And of course, there's a substitution. That time we don't have substitution, but now we have a lot of substitute goods, right? So you keep all those things in thing, and that's also the limitation of CPI when you consider the price. So just be aware of that. Now, what is the labor force? It is the sum of the unemployed and employed workers. I think everyone knows what is employed and unemployed means. So labor force, you combine that. And the working age is 15 to 69 years. These are the working age. Employed person are full-time employed, which is at least 35 hours or more, right? This is called employed. And anything less than that, we probably call it part-time or casual or something like that. So these are very standard definition. Having said that, you need to be very careful when you choose the age 15 to 69. Some of the countries are so underdeveloped and they're struggling with the poverty. You'll find that institutions like a child labor emerge. One of the problems with this country is I am poor. I cannot have food. I cannot provide food to my family. So in this case, all the child that I have and all those things, they go for labor market, right? So when you talk about this particular age, this is just an example, but don't count on that thing. There's a lot of other side of it. But these are the standard definition from the ILO, International Labor Organization. But that also questionable to many countries. Because when you define this thing, the first problem is you need to address the poverty. Poverty is a big challenge for us, right? That challenge prevent us to do something which is environment friendly. That challenge can also prevent us to implement this age as well, the workforce age, right? So just be careful about that. Now, the definition of the unemployment, so basically number of people unemployed divided by the labor force times 100. I think everyone knows that. What does that mean, right? Then you have 4 types of unemployment. Frictional unemployment. Basically, excuse me, what happens in the frictional unemployment means that there will be some unemployment because of the mismatch. Suppose I am an IT guy, but I couldn't find an IT job in this suburb. So I become unemployed, right? I'm working in a course temporarily. Even though I'm employed, but if I'm desperate, then I withdraw myself from the calls and I'm going to look for my suitable job. So when this thing happens, especially when the search cost is very high, because there is some job outside there, but I don't know, right? And that's called a frictional unemployment. Structural unemployment when the structure changes. Say, for example, labor-intensive technology replaced by the capital-intensive technology. Generally, in the labor-intensive technology, you need more worker. But the moment it was replaced by the capital-intensive technology, you need less worker. For example, 20 years back, when we run an accounting firm, we need a lot of accountants. But today, because of the computer software and all those things, we need less accountant. All we need who can operate this, right? So when this kind of shift takes, there will be unemployment. We call it structural. Another is the seasonal unemployment. What is the seasonal unemployment? You know, in the developing country during the harvest season, the unemployment rate drops because we need a lot of people for harvest, right? Once the harvest season goes, disappears, again the unemployment actually goes up, right? Cyclical unemployment, basically it goes with the business cycle, right? What does that mean? If the economy is booming, unemployment drops. If the economy is in the recession, unemployment goes up. So that's the idea. Now the full employment, this is the concept that you need to know. In economics, when we say full employment, it basically means all the resources are fully employed. So that basically means, now there's another way to look at, now again the Milton Friedman come up with the first thing, is called a natural rate of unemployment. Natural rate of unemployment means at full employment rate you also find some unemployment exists. It is not because they are unemployed, but it is because they are not getting their suitable job. Say, for example, I'm an IT person, I'm working for Coles, but then I'm desperate to look for IT job. I withdraw myself from the Coles and desperately looking for IT job. Now, this is an unemployment, but it's called a natural rate of unemployment in a sense that it doesn't mean that I'm unemployed. I can easily go back to Coles and work. but I'm not doing it because I'm searching for a suitable job. Clear? So at any full employment, you always find some unemployment is there. It's because of the mismatch, basically. Now, in Australia, as long as your unemployment rate drops to 4%, we also consider that 4% is the natural rate of unemployment, which basically means we arrive the full employment level, right? But it also depends country to country. Different country has a different natural rate of unemployment. Keep that thing in mind. Now, a simplified economy. So what is a simplified economy? Hey, hang on, what am I doing? Okay. A simplified economy is basically, I'll just go in a very simple way. Look at this picture. In the green triangle, you find 4. Can you see that? Is that green or blue? Is it blue? Hey, my color sense is really bad. So what that color is? Blue? So you have a government, you have a household, you have a farm, you have the rest of the world. Now, when I say simplified economy, I need a market. So in the market, you have a consumer, that is the demand curve you need. You have a supplier, that is you need a supply curve. So if I say construct a simplified economy, the first thing you keep in mind, you need a market. Now, do you think, should I choose C and G, this variable will give me a simplified economy? Or should I choose F and G? Or should I choose rest of the world and farm? Which one I will choose? I want to choose 2 variables to construct a simplified economy. What are these 2 variables? You already know the equation, C, I, G, and X, right? Among these 4, I need to choose any 2 to construct a simplified economy. The answer will be C and I, because C is the household. They are the buyers. And I is the farm, which are the producers. So if you want to create a market, you need at least buyers and sellers. So that basically means you need C and I. So if the exam question asks you, there's a 4 variables, take any 2 variables to consider a simplified economy, don't choose G and next of the world. That would be wrong. G is the government expenditure. They are the intervene the market, not the buying or selling. And rest of the world, that's the world market you're talking about, right? So that's why when you talk about this simplified economy, always remember it will be C and I. Clear? Now, one more important thing is, when I talk about this one, you can see this is the whole picture. C, I, G, and X. That's why and more importantly, each of these are related. Suppose in this picture, I take out all the farms. What will happen? Then you ended up with C, G, and rest of the world. Do you think this economy will survive? The thing is, household demand goods, right? Who produces the goods? Farm. And farm require household for what? Because they hire the workers, right? If farm disappears, do you think that household get work? Any job? They become unemployed. If they become unemployed, can they demand goods? No. So eventually it will collapse, right? So that's why you need to be careful. At the same time, suppose you take out the government out, then we know what happens in Great Depression in 1929. When there's no government intervention, market will not correct itself to some extent. When the confidence comes, then obviously that market can collapse. So clearly you can see that all of them are interlinked. Any of these things wiped out, it will create a lot of problem. Clear? Now, how the Amazon online shopping is coming into that picture? Hey, now I draw your attention, right? This is a part of your assignment. In this term, in this picture, how do you think Amazon came or fit in? Sorry? Amazon is not an Australian firm. Rest of the world, that's the key. Because Amazon is a multinational company. It's a US firm, right? So obviously the rest of the world, then they set up their farm in Australia, amazon.com.au, right? But even though they set up the farm in Australia, this is the multinational firm that invests in Australia. Now you can say this is the capital inflow, right? Have you heard the term called foreign direct investment? Amazon.com.au is the FDI in Australia. Clear? Now, if you discourage by charging high tax, basically you are reducing FDI. And if FDI is reduced, what will happen? Remember, all these sectors are interlinked. So the household, they can actually work with the farms, the multinational farms. But because of the tax, FDI goes down. Suppose Amazon withdraw their operation. Then those who can work for Amazon, they will never get a job. Potential job loss, right? So you can see that now it can fit in this model. Is that clear? Okay. Now, this is called a macroeconomic policy, but before, okay, macroeconomic policy. Always remember, now here's the thing. If you go home, do me one favor, print this page, and in your study room, put in the wall. So every time you come, you can see that thing there. As long as you remember these things, you will never make any mistake in the fiscal or monetary policy, more importantly, macroeconomic management. So what it is? On one hand, it's called fiscal policy, another hand is called a monetary policy. Now, before that, I think there's one diagram that I missed. What is the purpose of the diagram? I already explained. The purpose of this diagram is to show you at equilibrium, your income must be equal to expenditure. So when you draw the 45-degree line and that aggregate expenditure intersect the 45-degree line, you'll find that your aggregate expenditure will be always equal to your income, which you are showing in the horizontal axis. Aggregate expenditure you are showing in the vertical axis. Why is that? Look at the triangle. One angle is 45-degree. Another hand, it is the perpendicular, so it will be 90-degree. So sum of the three angles of a triangle will be 180 degrees, so the other angle must be 45 degree. So according to Euclidean geometry, if the two angles are equal of a triangle, the opposite hand must be equal. And the opposite hand, on one hand is showing the aggregate expenditure, another hand is showing income, so your aggregate expenditure must be equal to your income. The bottom intuition is, if you don't want this picture, then always remember the purpose of this picture is to show you at equilibrium your expenditure must be equal to income. And as I give you the intuition before, if your income is not equal to your expenditure, either you are borrowing or you are saving. Either way, you are exposing yourself to the external shock. And when you are exposing to the external shock, it cannot be an equilibrium, right? So this is the standard picture to explain that your income is equal to expenditure, and that will be equilibrium. Is that clear? Okay. But I don't emphasize that much attention to it, right? So clearly you can see. Now, the fiscal policy and monetary policy, always remember the demand management policy. Now, here's the important part that I'm going to tell you, but later on I'm going to explain more. What equation that I ask you to memorize? C plus I plus G plus NX, but these are the total expenditure. The problem is, sorry, I'm having a lot of problem with the asthma, so my lungs is a bit congested. Okay. We need to calculate the aggregate demand for the whole country. Now remember, demand means the preference of buyers. If you want to map the preference of Nobin, that will be complicated enough. And if you want to do two persons' preference, Della and Nobin, perhaps it will take 10 years or 20 years to do that, even with a supercomputer, right? Now you map the preference of the entire people who live in this economy, probably you will never get it. right? Because preference is the psychological thing. You are mapping essentially the emotion of a person, right? And it can have a lot of variation. So there is an economist, his name is Paul Samuelson, and he says, okay, if we follow in that path, it's a never-ending path. So forget about that. What else I can do? He called it revealed preference. He says, okay, I don't know what Nobin is thinking right now. I'm pretty sure he's thinking a lot of things at the moment in his head. But I don't care about that. I only care at this particular moment how much money Nobin has spent. Right? So you can see that I'm holding my coffee mug or whatever it is, right? So that basically means I spent $2 on it, right? And he says that expenditure actually reveals his demand, his preference. Why? If Nobin does not spend $1 on this coffee, probably it is not a part of his demand, right? So here's, he says, it's called a revealed preference. If you spend money, your expenditure reveals your preference. So that expenditure is nothing but your demand. Clear? If that's the case, then he says, okay, follow this path. So basically what we learn, your expenditure pattern reveals your demand, right? Now suppose we know how much country can spend. What is that? C, I, G, and X. Then according to that theory, that expenditure will be country's demand, right? So when you add C plus I plus G plus NX, we call it aggregate expenditure. And then we say the aggregate expenditure is nothing but the country's demand according to revealed preference, right? Therefore, whenever someone says aggregate demand, it is nothing but C plus I plus G plus NX. Now, when I say demand management policy, it basically means this policy always affects your demand. It will not affect your supply curve, but it will affect your demand curve. That's why it's called a demand management policy. Now look at the fiscal policy and monetary policy. Both are known as a demand management policy. Now I'm going to tell you how they affect demand. In fiscal policy, generally we have a government expenditure or taxation. These are the two vital instruments. Now when you have a government expenditure, it is clear because when you look at the aggregate expenditure, G is there. That's for sure. Where is the T? Taxation. Let's call it T. Now we know who's going to pay tax. Household, right? Farm. And how do I capture that? Well, one way to do that, look at the disposable income. And disposable income means your gross income less your tax amount, right? And generally, we assume the household paid the tax. Then which variable will be going to be affected? C. If the tax goes up, you have a less disposable income, therefore your C will go down. If the tax goes down, then you have more disposable income, your C will go up. Clear? So when I talk about the fiscal policy, either it will affect G or it will affect C. Is that clear? So that is a part of my demand. So obviously this is a demand management policy. Now the question is, when I say expansionary fiscal policy, it means when the demand goes up. So what will be that one in this case? If you lower the tax. Because if you lower the tax, your C will go up, which means your aggregate expenditure goes up. By that, it means aggregate demand will go up. So this is an expansionary policy. If you lower the G, what will happen? Or say increase G, it will be also expansionary policy. Lower G is the opposite. G goes down means your aggregate expenditure, which is C plus I plus G plus NX, G will go down, aggregate expenditure goes down, therefore your demand will go down, and we call it contractionary policy. Clear? Now look at the monetary policy. One of the tools in the monetary policy is the interest rate. The question is, which part or which variable actually depends on the interest rate? One of the variables that heavily depends on the interest rate is the investment. Farm borrows money, and interest rate is the borrowing cost. So if my borrowing cost is high, do you think I invest money more? So investment and interest rate, they have a negative relationship. So if the interest rate goes up, my investment goes down. And investment goes down means my aggregate demand will drop, because aggregate demand is C plus I plus G plus NX, because as I say, expenditure reveals your aggregate demand. Because that will drop, it is also known as a contractionary monetary policy, because it contracts your aggregate demand. On the other hand, if you lower the interest rate, it will be the opposite. Lower the interest rate means my borrowing cost goes down, so I have incentive to borrow more. That means my investment I will go up, therefore my aggregate demand will go up. Because my aggregate demand goes up, I call it expansionary monetary policy. Clear? But now it makes sense that whether you do the fiscal policy or monetary policy, all do the same thing, it will change your aggregate demand. That's why it's known as a demand management policy. Is that clear? Next week, I will show you in the ADS model how this policy works. So till then, make sure you have these things in your memory, right? So put it in your study room and look at this, what is happening. Now the question is the money demand, money supply. So what is the money? Can anyone tell me what is money is? Okay, what is money? Huh? Hang on, I can't hear you. Can you say? Suppose I'm a 5-year-old kid and you're giving me that definition. Do you think I will understand what you're talking about? First thing I will ask, what is government? Then I will ask, what is law? Then I will ask, what is the legality means here, right? Suppose a 5-year-old kid asks you, what is money? What will be your answer? Do you think that the 5-year-old kid will understand what the instrument means here? If you say the instrument, I would probably say piano, guitar, that musical instrument. Keep it simple, keep it simple. You already know. The 5-year-old kid will not understand what the buy and sell thing means. Okay, here's the thing. If someone asks you, what is money in the rest of your life, not now, this is the money, coin. Even a 5-year-old kid can understand this is money. So the definition of money is very simple, cash and coin. Keep it simple, don't go further, right? What you are saying is basically a function of the money, but that's a different issue. Like he says legal exchange and all those things. Basically you're talking about one of the function of the money is the medium of exchange. But I don't ask you what is the function of money, I ask you what is money. Whenever someone says what is money, the answer should be cash and coins. That's it, right? Even a 5-year-old kid can understand what it is. Okay, now that we established what is money demand means? Yes, demand for cash and coins. You're right, you're right. So you need to explain a little bit more. Right now, what is my money demand? No, I already spent that money. Huh? No, that cannot be. Whenever someone asks you what is your money demand or demand for money, how much money, that means cash and coins, you are holding in your wallet right now. At the moment, I can tell you what is my money demand. 10 cents. That's my money demand. Right? So what does that mean? Remember, when you hold a money in your pocket or in your wallet, that's your money demand. Holding money in your pocket or in your wallet has a cost. We call it opportunity cost of holding money. Why? Let's create in a different way. Probably 10 cents, the cost will not be high. But suppose I have a quite big pocket, and in that pocket I have $100 million. It's quite big, right? Now I put that money in my pocket. What will be the cost of holding that money in my pocket? In other words, I'm talking about the opportunity cost. What is the thing that I'm giving up? Interest rate. So what does that mean? The moment you keep more and more money in your pocket, you're giving up those interest rates which you can easily earn if you put your money in the bank. Right? So in other words, interest rate is the opportunity cost of holding money. Is that clear? Now the question is, what is the relationship between holding money and the interest rate? It is the negative relationship. If the interest rate goes up, I'm going to hold less and less money, right? If the interest rate goes down, then I'm going to hold more and more money in my pocket. Why? Because I'm losing less money. Am I right? Think about this way. At the moment, interest rate is 0% and I'm holding money in my pocket is $100 million. What will be my cost? 0. All of a sudden, the interest rate goes up from 0 to 10%. How much money I'm going to hold? Basically, whatever happens, I'm going to hold less money now. That's for sure. That also means you come up with the idea of the demand curve. That holding money has a price. And that price is nothing but your interest rate. And what we know about the law of demand, if the price goes up, you demand less. If the price goes down, you demand more. So it's exactly the same intuition. The holding money price is interest rate. If the interest rate goes up, you hold less money. On the other hand, if interest rate goes down, you hold more money. Does it make sense? So if I ask you, what does that look like? It will be downward sloping straight away. That's why when you have a money demand curve, you always find your money demand curve looks like downward sloping. And here the price, think about this way, the interest rate is the price. Clear? Now the question is money supply. What is money supply here? And more importantly, if you look at the supply curve, it is not the supply curve that we are thinking of. It's not an upward sloping, it's just a vertical. That gives us a question, why is a vertical? To analyze that, you need to go a little bit back. Who determined the money supply? You need to ask a genuine question like that. Central bank. Is the central bank is a profit maximizer? No. Then central bank has no interest to look at the interest rate. In fact, it determines the interest rate. Right? Therefore, we say that the money supply is exogenously determined by the government. Here, the government representative is central bank. That's why the money supply is vertical. It has no relationship with the interest rate. But what it does, it determines the interest rate. So what will be the equilibrium interest rate in this model? Where money demand equals to money supply. So if you look at this I star, can you see my hand, a little hand here? So basically, you can see that this is the point where money demand equal to money supply. So your interest rate is I star and equilibrium money demand is Q star N, right? Now suppose central bank wants to increase the interest rate. How it will do that? Remember, central bank cannot change the money demand. How much money I hold in my pocket, that's not a central bank's business. It is my preference, right? And by law, I'll be protected. Central bank cannot point a gun and say, hey, you can't hold less money. You can't do that. Right? Then if that's the case, then central bank cannot change my money demand. But central bank can change one thing, money supply. So if it reduces the money supply, then the money supply shifts from here to MS2. And look at this, the new equilibrium interest rate will be then I star 2. And in that case, your interest rate goes up at equilibrium. On the other hand, if the central bank wants to decrease the interest rate, it will do the other way. It increases the money supply, then new equilibrium interest rate is here, and your interest rate drops. Clear? This is how the central bank operates. Now, there is a couple of interesting things happens in this real world. One of these important thing is those who come from India is the demonetization. It has a huge effect, and it is also sparks a lot of debates. Some of the part of the government who actually introduced that, people are not happy. Some people are happy, but majority of them are very, very unhappy, right? But it is also justified to prevent corruption and all those things, right? So again, central bank is the government body and they can do that, right? Keep that thing in mind. Now the question is, how the central bank increase the money supply or decrease the money supply? Well, increase the money supply, I can always do that, print more cash and coins, right? But that is a very dangerous thing to do. Why? Because if you give more money to people, it will bring inflation, right? Why is inflation? You give them more money to people, they have more money, their purchasing power goes up. What will happen? C goes up. And if C goes up, aggregate demand equation says C plus I plus G plus NX. C goes up means aggregate demand will go up. That will push up the price and bring inflation. Clear? So this is not a good idea. What else I can do? Another thing, which is a very popular thing in the central bank case, is called an open market operation. So what is an open market operation? And I'm going to tell you. Now, this time, I'm going to ask you as a volunteer. I think I have enough use Dell, right? What's your name?
Fanny.
Sorry? Penny? Fanny. Okay. Fanny and I. So suppose I'm the central bank, right? Fanny is the consumer. And I issue a bond. It's called a central bank bond. This is the central bank bond, and it is worth of $1 billion, right? I'm going to sell my bond to Fanny. Take the bond. Where's my money? Give some money. Just pretend. Suppose this is your money, right? So this is the $1 billion, right? So what I'm trying to do for the off-campus student, Fanny has got $1 billion. In this case, that geometric box, what the box is called? Pencil box is the $1 billion, and this piece of paper is the bond, right? So you take the bond, and I take the money. Money is which hand? Central bank or Fanny? Central bank. So who takes the money? So money goes to central bank's vault. That basically means Fanny is the representative of the economy. So money is taken out from the economy, goes back to the central bank's vault. It also means money supply in the economy actually goes down. Does it make sense? Do you understand how it operates now? Now, after 2 years, I come back and I say, Fanny, I'm going to buy back my bond. So initially, you give me $1 billion. You make a lot of profit. I'm going to give you $2 billion. Right? Then she has an incentive because she's making money now. Right? So here, take your money, give my bond back. Take my bond, come on. Okay, so who gets money now? Fanny. So money supply in the economy goes up, right? This is the idea of the open market operation. So in other words, when the central bank sells its bond or securities, it basically means money supply goes down. And when the central bank buys back its securities and bonds, it basically means money supply goes up. So if you forget what does the open market operation means, think about this way, Naveen and Fanny, right? Fanny is a market representative and Naveen is the central bank. And what they did, immediately you understand what is happening there. I think you will never forget this operation in the near future at least, right? So this is called open market operation. Now the last bit, here it is, basically it tells you how the interest rate goes up and goes down, right? So in other words, look at this, the Reserve Bank lowers the cash rate. Cash rate means interest rate. So what will happen? The quantity money supply, quantity of money and supply of loanable funds increase, the long-term real interest rate falls, the consumption expenditure and net export increase, aggregate demand increase. So think about it this way. Interest rate, cash rate is your interest rate. Interest rate drops. Obviously, it means borrowing cost goes down. Investment goes up. Remember that chart that I've given you? If the investment goes up, what will happen to aggregate demand? It will go up. That's expansionary. You look at this, aggregate demand increases, right? That's the idea. Then another one is the Reserve Bank raises the cash rate. Basically, your borrowing cost goes up, investment drops, aggregate demand will drop. That's the main essence of this one. You can see that aggregate demand decreases, right? Later on, I will show you real GDP and all those things in the next week class when I will cover the ADS model, right? And I think I finished today's lecture. And there will be no problem set, no practice question for this week. So next week, there will be no Blackboard session, okay? Any question? I'm glad that we catch up at the end, right? Even though we lost the 45 minutes, but we are now up to date in terms of Blackboard session, in terms of everything. No question? Then I can stop here. Thank you. Hang on.